Greetings, welcome. It is Wednesday, December 1st. You have reached the Soule of Wisdom. I am Dan. She's producer wife Beth.
Hi, we made it to the final month of this year, amazingly.
Yeah, and, it is a dumpster fire, but there hasn't been any kind of explosion large enough to take out the continent or anything like that.
No, there's been small amounts of accelerant added for sure, but...
Small amounts of accelerant. At today's prices, that's no small feat either.
I know, right? It's expensive.
Love it. So, before we get started with segment one of today's show, it is December 1st. If you look behind me because you're watching on the visually gifted side, if you are listening on the podcast, just imagine what you might see. There's like a whole wall of Lego creations behind me, and about a dozen more sitting to the left of me off camera that we've got to build yet.
Yeah.
And I imagine with Christmas even more coming. But speaking of like at today's prices and stuff, so holding up right here, I was gifted the Lego Star Wars Advent Calendar because nothing celebrates the month of December and the birth of Jesus quite like a Lego Star Wars Advent Calendar.
Yeah. You were gifted it for your birthday, which is actually in October, so he's had to sit on this for a while.
Yes, indeed. So, but when we mentioned, like rising prices and stuff, before we turned on the camera here, producer wife pointed out to me that these things, again, because of like supply chain issues and stuff like that, they're selling for over $80 on eBay right now. And I looked at her and said, should we just sell it?
Yeah, no.
And
That's
she's
a
like,
gift.
no. So we're going to open this up during the days when we have a show. So let's open up number one. And it's, I have no idea what it is. Yay!
There's a picture.
Oh, there's a picture. Look at that. Okay, I don't know how well this is going to come through on camera. We'll find out. It's that thing. It's some kind of a little vehicle dude.
Cool.
Not sure what kind of vehicle dude, but we'll figure it out. That's half the fun. Is there a picture of the vehicle dude on the box? Somewhere, maybe. I do not see the equivalent. I'm sure it's on here somewhere, but I'm not going to waste time. We'll figure that out later. All right, so I'll build it, and then maybe tomorrow we can show it off.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So, onward and upward. Oh, before we get into stuff, visit us, please, soulewisdom.com, S-O-U-L-E wisdom.com. We have many stores with many gifts. It is not too late to order from us. Granted, everything we do is handmade, but we still have time to get it to you.
Yep.
So if you would like to give a gift that's a little bit... off the beaten path, a little bit more special, perhaps. Give our stuff a look. We've got jewelry, we've got paintings, we've got cool things.
Yeah.
You can email us questions at soulewisdom.com. You can tweet us at soulwisdom. And speaking of tweeting, Parag Agrawal, I believe that's how it's pronounced. So we mentioned him on one of yesterday's segments. He replaced Jack Dorsey as CEO. We went and analyzed one of his past tweets from like a decade ago.
Yeah.
And we talked about how there may be a little bit of a double standard from the fact that he could put out whatever he wanted without context to it, and that was fine. But if, for example, I tweeted out some like medical statement from certain doctors, even if I give it context, that wouldn't be allowed, and
Yeah.
I'd get kicked off and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And what I said about Mr. Agrawal is let's just see what he does, and we'll judge it from there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been like 24 hours. Boy, do we have a lot to judge already.
Of course.
And it didn't get better. So let's dig into this, shall we?
It's 2021. Most of the time, this year's stuff hasn't gotten better. So,
It has not.
It's keeping in theme, that's all.
Very astute operation?
Observation.
Something with an Asian in it.
Yeah.
Very good, producer wife. Okay, so let's start off with this article from The Verge. And this is the first policy change that the new CEO of Twitter has made. They are banning the posting of pictures of private individuals against their wishes. Subheadline, it will weigh context, newsworthiness, and other factors. The dreaded other factors.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says Twitter will now let private individuals request takedowns of pictures or videos featuring them. Sharing personal media such as images or videos can potentially violate a person's privacy and may lead to emotional or physical harm. The Twitter safety blog post reads, "The misuse of private media can affect everyone, but can have a disproportionate effect on women, activists, dissidents, and members of minority communities. Twitter will evaluate complaints by the subject of the video or picture or someone representing them according to its larger private information policy."
So I have a question already. I wonder if they're going to apply said policy to inaccurate spoof accounts. You know, those accounts that pretend to be like somebody who's famous, but they're not really the real account. Because last I knew, all of the major social media conglomerates don't do crap about those. And that's a big problem.
That is a big problem, and I don't have the answer.
But they use their likeness in the picture.
Yeah.
That's a profile picture. That's not them. So you would think that would, you know, also count.
I may have an answer to that, actually. Let's read this next paragraph.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. No, don't be sorry. I was just glancing, and I'm like, I think I have the answer for you. The rule potentially covers all media of private individuals without the permission of the person depicted, but the blog post describes several scenarios where Twitter wouldn't remove that media. As implied, it's not applicable to people who are public figures. So that might answer your spoof account thing. A category typically that includes politicians, celebrities, and other well-known people. Twitter will also take other context into consideration, as well as existing rules like ban on non-consensual sexual imagery. We recognize there are instances where account holders may share images or videos of private individuals in an effort to help someone involved in a crisis situation, such as the aftermath of a violent event or as part of a newsworthy event due to public interest value, and this might outweigh the safety risk to a person, the post says. It also may leave media online if it's being covered by traditional news outlets. It will consider if a particular image or accompanying tweet adds value to the public discourse and is being shared in the public interest or relevant to the community.
So the Kyle Rittenhouse memes would have been fine, is what they're saying.
Hang tight on that. Hang tight on that.
I have opinions, sorry.
Yeah, and then it says the goal is to remove pictures or videos that are fueling online harassment campaigns, although in practice implementation will depend on moderators judging the nuance of a particular situation. It's unclear, for example, how Twitter might have ruled on a 2020 Twitter video depicting a white woman calling police on a black man, an incident that was widely reported in mainstream outlets, but only following a viral Twitter video. So it went to Twitter first. Twitter spokesman Trenton Kennedy says moderators will heavily weigh the circumstances of a given post. We're going to evaluate things in the context in which they're shared, so I encourage folks not to draw too many conclusions from past instances or hypotheticals. The policy will require a first-person report requesting the takedown, not just a general complaint. Twitter moderators will consider whether the post was shared publicly on the social networks, not just traditional media outlets. The general rule around our private information policy is that if it's available and easily accessible off of Twitter, we're not going to take action on Twitter. Okay. Go ahead and say what you got to say, Buffy, and we'll start there.
Well, I will say that a lot of things, whether it's Twitter or other social media, in the last couple of years that has made mainstream news has started, like that article pointed out, on Twitter. So if they're taking stuff down, I guess the other question is, it's unlikely that this process will be quick or expedited unless they get really good filters here, because otherwise they'll just be pulling down anything that has a picture or video. So the likelihood of stuff catching mainstream news attention before it gets pulled is also pretty high.
Yeah.
So I don't see the good that this is going to do.
Well, first of all, the policy in the statement is filled with mights and maybes.
Yeah.
We've talked about mights and maybes before.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of them because they offer no clear direction. It's all gray. We have, for example, 10 rules that govern our shop, excuse me, for Art and Soul, our jewelry business. Every one of those 10 rules has the word shall in it. Not one of them says might or maybe.
Yeah.
It says shall, because it's a clear roadmap for how we're going to operate. All right? A rule or a policy filled with this much ambiguity only leaves it open for them to control things, to push the narrative in the direction that they want.
Which is exactly why it's written that way.
Exactly. Because you'll notice one of the things, too, that was mentioned in the policy was that they will consider whether or not the video was part of mainstream news sources. So they're giving more validity to CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, over what civilian reporters or freelance reporters might come up with. Now, you mentioned Rittenhouse, okay? We know what happened that night with Kyle. We have all of the video because of people like Richie McGinnis and Elijah Schaefer and others, people who were there as independent reporters documenting what was going on.
Yeah.
By Twitter's rules, they could easily say, okay, this isn't part of mainstream media, and you know, you didn't have the permission of the 5 people standing in the background, so we're going to go ahead and just take that down.
Except it doesn't fit their narrative to take it down, so.
Actually, with Kyle, it would have fit their narrative to take it down.
Well,
because you can argue that the video showed self-defense, and you can argue that because that's what the jury decided happened.
Yeah.
Based on, in large part, the video evidence that was gathered by these freelancers that were there.
Though, I'll also argue that the majority of the people in general public that had seen the videos on Twitter still believed he was guilty.
Yeah. No, they did.
Because social media declared him guilty even after those videos were made public.
But if they had the ability, and you know, we don't have to make this a Kyle Rittenhouse discussion, but my larger point is if they have the ability to decide whether or not a particular video may or may not fit the narrative that they want to push, they've just put a policy in place that allows them to yank it. For 2 reasons. They could argue that, well, it's not picked up by mainstream news, so we're not going to allow it here. And then they can also argue that, well, again, you don't have the permission of the 5 people in the background there, so out it goes.
Yeah.
So I think that it makes it even harder to have the ability to use Twitter as a propagator of correct information.
Yes.
It makes it even easier for them to bend the narrative into what it is that they want to see.
Yeah.
Now, there's a reason why I'm saying this. Segment 1's going to be a little longer than what we normally do because I'm only halfway there at the moment. Let's go back to Mr. Browser because, you know, we talked about this tweet that Mr. Agrawal put out like 10 years ago. We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
And I said, look, it's probably, you know, there's a problem with like double standards, but in the same respect, I don't know if it really matters what the guy said 10 years ago. But I will take into account what he said in an interview with MIT Technology Review on November 18th of 2020.
Yeah.
That was only a year ago. I think that's fairly relevant. So there's a couple of things that stand out to me in this interview. Okay. So the comment was made during this interview, we've seen misinformation, so-called credible sources. How do you define that phrase? Agrawal responded, I think that's the existential question for our times. Defining misinformation is really, really hard. As we learn through time, our understanding of truth also evolves. We attempt to not adjudicate truth, we focus on potential for harm. So we focused way less on what's true and what's false. We focus way more on potential for harm as a result of certain context being applied on the platform without appropriate context. Okay. So, a couple of things that stand out in his statement there. Number one, he's talking about applying appropriate context.
Yeah.
But we've already established that that doesn't matter to them, really.
Yeah.
Because he had that tweet where there wasn't any context at all applied to it, and that was fine. But again, I know of 2 specific doctors where if I tweet out anything they say, I'm going to be put in Twitter jail for it.
Yeah.
Even if I apply context.
Yeah.
Even if I said, this is a stupid statement. Even if I came out against it, simply putting out the words attached to the name are going to put me in Twitter jail.
Yeah,
so,
a bottle pull it for sure.
So, he's lying.
Yeah.
The other thing where he says, as we learn through time, our understanding of truth also evolves. I have a big problem with that. Go ahead.
I will say, taking his statement, I know how you're interpreting it, and I'm not trying to defend him. Taking the statement at face value is true. His understanding of what is true might change, but the truth itself doesn't change. Truth is standard across time. That's the definition of it. But his ability or inability to actually conceive it might change.
Well, that's just it. I think what he's saying through that statement is we're going to continue to evolve how we define truth.
Yeah, no, I know.
And that is dangerous.
Yes.
That is Orwell 1984 level BS right there. It really is.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have, in my mind, in my world, okay, if there need to be some basic tenets. And one of them has to be how it is that we define what truth really means. Because that is essential for proper communication.
I agree.
If you can't point at something and go, that's true, that's not true, just based on a standard definition of what truth is. Like if I can't say the sky is blue and that not be like an existential truth, and it's okay for somebody to go, no, it's actually, red.
Yeah.
Well, then language itself and communication itself just breaks down at that point. 2 + 2 becomes 5.
I was arguing, I guess, devil's advocate a little bit deeper on the scale of that sentence. If you're taking it directly as what he said, you could argue something like, for example, you might believe a truth being like the 10 Commandments and thou shalt not commit adultery, but you have a much different understanding of what that means at age 5 than you do at age 50.
Fair.
That was the only point I was trying to make.
And maybe he is 5.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem. I don't know.
Do you get what I'm saying, though?
No, I do. No, I get where you're coming from.
I don't think that's what he meant by that statement. I'm just
either.
arguing if you took it actually just at face value, that it could mean what I was trying to say as well.
Well, by his own standards, we're supposed to consider the source of things and the context around it and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So if I consider that we have a highly educated individual who's had a lot of experience at Twitter and everything else, and now he's running the show, I think that context gives me the ability to read that statement the way I did.
Yeah.
But I'm probably wrong, and I'll probably end up in Twitter jail for it. Who knows? Got to be sure to post this one on Twitter.
Right.
Okay. So one last thing that he said. This is at the very end of the interview. There's a lot of things he said in this interview that we could go into. I'm just picking out the 2 highlights for me. We could spend 2 hours on this thing. So, interviewer says, you're caught in a bit of a hard place, as somebody in the audience also pointed out. You're trying to combat misinformation. You also want to protect free speech as a core value, and also in the U.S. as the First Amendment. How do you balance those two? Get this. His response: our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment. Our role is to serve a healthy public conversation, and our moves are reflective of things that we believe lead to a healthier public conversation. kinds of things that we do about this. Less focus on thinking about free speech, but thinking about how the times have changed. One of the changes today we see is free speech is easy on the internet. Most people can speak. Where our role is particularly emphasized is who can be heard. The scarce commodity today is attention. There's a lot of content, a lot of tweets out there. Not a lot of it gets attention, but a subset does. And so increasingly, our role is moving towards how we recommend content. And that is sort of a struggle we're working through in terms of how we make sure these recommendations that we're building, how we direct people's attention, is leading to a healthy public conversation that is most participatory.
I'm going to wave the BS flag here a little bit because, first of all, they're a US-based company. Second of all, even if they weren't a US-based company, they operate in the United States, which means they should be abiding by the laws of the state or the country in which they're operating. And I know they do this for other countries and nations because they've had to adjust their policies as such in order to not be yanked from platforms.
Yeah. So something I heard from somebody else today, and I don't remember who it was, so I'm gonna credit the unknown source on this one, but they made a good point. They said that Parag was actually born, raised, and educated in, I believe it was India. And India does not have a First Amendment freedom of speech like we have. Specifically, they have laws that restrict speech in their constitution.
Yeah.
They have laws that that speak to speaking out against the government, for example, things like that. So his understanding of what free speech is and how it should really work is probably skewed by how he was raised and how he was educated. But regardless, if you're going to run a U.S. company, you better get up to speed, dude.
Yeah.
And for him to say, First Amendment, we don't care about that. What we care about is what we believe a healthy discussion should look like. That is paraphrasing what he said.
Yeah.
Again, them just flat out saying, we run this ship, we're going to decide what's up and what's down, and you're all going to play along. But at that point, you come into the whole Section 230 thing.
And I'm very anti-government interference, but I believe in cases where companies that are operating within the confines of the U.S. come out and say we're not going to follow U.S. laws, there should be repercussions.
Well, and I have issue with this too, because if we bring in the Section 230 laws, which, you know, we can talk about it another time because that's a whole thing. You can find all sorts of videos out there. But this is a violation of 230 because at that point they're acting like a publisher.
Yeah.
The whole idea is it's supposed to... 230 is the shield that they use to not be treated like a publisher, so they're not held liable for what's on the platform. But this is them acting as a publisher. It's them making choices as to what goes on the platform.
Yep.
And it's a bunch of horse hockey.
Yep.
I want to say worse words, but I'm not going to. We try to be as family friendly as possible. So we're like 24, 48 hours into this guy's reign, and I'm kind of already wanting Jack back.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he's a weird dude, and I don't agree with some of the things that he's done, like the whole bury the Hunter Biden laptop story, which more and more data has shown now probably would have swung the election the other way had more people known.
Yeah.
Because they've done polls all over the place where people have said, oh, if I knew that, I would have voted the other way.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that this guy, if he pushes too hard in these directions, people are going to yet again try to flee to another platform like a Parler or something like that. Minds might also be some potential. But just a quick side point, Minds has a cool thing. If there's a post that goes into question there, it goes in front of a jury.
Interesting.
Part of being on Minds is you commit to being a potential jury member, and if somebody has a problem with a post, they select users at random, they put the post in front of them and say, you vote, does this violate community guidelines and policies?
Interesting.
and then the jury rules.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that might be a way to go too. I don't know. All right, I think we've discussed this as much as needs to be discussed, and now we're disgusted by what we've discussed.
Yes.
All right, we'll be back with you at noon. Please do like, subscribe, share, do all those things for us. It does help get the show out, and we believe that we have some good things to say. I think we had some good things to say in this segment.
Yeah.
If I might say so myself. We will be back at noon Eastern. Until then, thanks for listening. You folks take care. Bye-bye.